Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 25 of the 2023 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And before we jump into the content, I'm now 2 weeks post-surgery for my torn pec muscle. Actually sitting here in a sling right now. Another 4 weeks in a sling, but actually getting to start doing a little bit of movement and start physical therapy here in the next week. So hopefully things will continue to progress. We'll only have to be in the sling for another 4 weeks and then really start being able to work on more movement and actually some strength training. So really excited and looking forward to that. When you look at the 2023 NFL draft, torn pec muscle actually hits one of our top 20 draft prospects. If you recall, Nolan Smith, the outstanding outside linebacker there for the Georgia Bulldogs, had his 2022 college football season cut short due to a torn pectoral muscle. Now he's back and looked better than ever at the combine and is primed for a first-round selection that we'll get to see the 27th of this month. That's right, recording this podcast Sunday, April 2nd. So we are just 25 days from the start of the NFL draft. Obviously, there's still a lot to cover, and we started our positional breakdown with last podcast talking about the quarterbacks. Now it's time to take a look at the running backs, and as I did with that podcast, I want to really take a look at the last 5 drafts for the running back position, because really, in order for us to move forward, we first have to kind of take a look back and really see what happened in the past 5 drafts. Kind of gives us an idea of what to expect for this 2023 draft. Now, if we go back 2018, that was the year that Saquon Barkley was drafted number 2 overall, and really the last time that we saw a running back taken in the top 10. So when you think about that, obviously that is a long time. You look at it, 2017 we saw Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey come off the board at number 4 and number 8. So since then, obviously we know that the position's been devalued, but when you look at some of those names, these are some of the big heavy hitters at that running back position. Granted, as we go through this, you'll also see quite a few names that we've seen on day 2 and day 3 of the draft. Now, 2018, we had a total of 21 running backs taken. Rashad Penny was taken by Seattle at the end of round number 1. Sony Michel to the Patriots with the number 31 overall pick. You look at both Penny and Michel. These were guys that essentially played a role, but were never the bell cow, if you will. Nick Chubb, obviously, second round. He's been a home run there for the Browns. Ronald Jones for the Buccaneers, then the Chiefs. Now he's backing up Tony Pollard there in Dallas. So a lot of impact there at the front end of that draft. But as you go through it, not a whole lot of guys really stuck there in the NFL. Nyheim Hines, fourth pick in round number 4, number 104 overall. He's carved a niche out for himself. Then you have Boston Scott, round number 6, the diminutive one out of Louisiana Tech. Came off the board in round number 6. He's still in the league and actually doing really well with the Eagles' stable of running backs. You talk about diminutive running backs. We've had Tariq Cohen in the past as well. You look at Deuce Vaughn in this year's draft. I've got him penciled in there in the 6th round. So as we go through that, we'll be talking about that. Justin Jackson, also a guy. Look, he was number 251 overall there in the 7th round. The guy that was a rotational piece there for the Chargers. 2019, a couple of heavy hitters there at the top as well. Obviously, Josh Jacobs. We know the impact that he's had there for the Raiders. Led the league in rushing, number 24 overall. Miles Sanders, obviously we know what he meant to the Eagles. He's moved on, but 2nd round pick. Didn't really see a whole lot there in the first 2 rounds, just those 2 guys coming off the board versus 2018 where we saw a total of 7 guys come off the board. Mentioned the first 5. On top of that, Kerryon Johnson, Darius Geis, and then Royce Freeman was the lone 3rd round pick. So a total of 8 running backs coming off the board there on the first 2 days of the draft. You look at it in 2019, there were a total of 7. So not a whole lot of impact there in the first 2 rounds, but then you see Darrell Henderson to the Rams, David Montgomery to the Bears, Devin Singletary to the Bills, Damian Harris Alexander Madison. 7 guys there, but a lot of the impact and really the depth in that draft was there in that round number 3. But look, round 4, I always say you can get running backs later on as well. You look at it, and there's Tony Pollard sitting right there, 128 overall. Really the home run pick of that draft, of the 2019 draft, on day number 3. But you look at a lot of the other names, Bryce Love, Justice Hill, Benny Snell, Raquel Armstead, Kadri Ollison, Jordan Scarlett, Travion Williams, Ty Johnson, guys that just, they had their run, and, guys that really just have not been able to stick around. Myles Gaskin, one exception there, number 234 overall. So again, running backs, you're going to see that theme. Running backs in round number 7, there seems to be one guy every year that seems to stick at that NFL level. 2020, just 16 running backs taken there, and that was the year that Clyde Edwards-Helaire was taken with a lone first-round selection at 32 overall. But you look at some of the impact players here. This is where we saw 5 running backs come off the board in round number 2. DeAndre Swift and Jonathan Taylor. Swift going 35 overall to the Lions. Jonathan Taylor, 41 overall to the Colts. We know what Jonathan Taylor means to that Indy offense when he is fully healthy. Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, A.J. Dillon, all guys that are making impacts for the teams that drafted them. You've got Keyshawn Vaughn, who's been a nice rotational piece there for the Buccaneers. Zach Moss has been a physical presence there in the league as well. So that was a draft class again. Guys really headlined by the first 2 days of the draft. So when you talk about, hey, I can get running backs later on, you can. But really what we're seeing is the impact players, more often than not, are there in the first 3 to 4 rounds of the draft, and then you may find a diamond in the rough later on. 2021, 2 running backs taken in round number 1. Najee Harris, Travis Etienne going back-to-back, 24 and 25 to the Steelers and Jags. Javonte Williams, we know he's battled some injuries there with the Broncos. He was the lone 2nd-round selection. Then Trey Sermon in round number 3 to the 49ers. Obviously not a huge impact here with this running back class. At the top we saw some of that, but it's interesting. Just 4 guys taken in the first 2 days of the draft. Ended up seeing a lot of depth though on day number 3, and that's where we saw a total of about 20 running backs overall taken in this draft. So that's 16 running backs taken on day number 3. That's when Michael Carter goes to the Jets. Kenny Nwangwu going to the Vikings. Ramondre Stevenson, been a beast there for the Pats. Chuba Hubbard to the Panthers. Kenneth Gainwell to the Eagles. Elijah Mitchell to the 49ers. A lot of guys that have been able to make an impact. Khalil Herbert is sticking around there with the Bears as well. So, and he was actually a 6th-round pick, number 217 overall. That's in the 6th round. But again, you see these running backs, most of them on the first 3 to 4 rounds of the draft. Gainwell was a 5th-round pick. Elijah Mitchell was a 6th-round pick. So there are some exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, you're seeing a lot of these guys, again, first 4 rounds of the draft. Last season, no running backs taken in the 1st round. I think everybody was shocked that Breece Hall did not come off the board in the 1st round. He was the number 1 running back taken. He was the 4th pick in round number 2, number 36 overall to the Jets. And we've seen what a beast he was. Had he not gotten injured, he would have been competing for that Offensive Rookie of the Year. Kenneth Walker III, look, he also had an impressive rookie season there with Seattle. Really solidified that running game for them. He was number 9 in the 2nd round, 41 overall to Seattle. And then James Cook, the lone running back taken in the back half of round number 2, number 63 overall going to the Bills. And then obviously there's Rachaad White, Tyrion Davis-Price to the 49ers, Brian Robinson to the Commanders. That rounds out your 2nd day of the draft. Just 6 running backs taken. 3 in round number 2, 3 in round number 3. And really what you saw was the top 4 running backs there. Hall, Walker, Cook, and White. They were the most versatile running backs in that draft class. And so you see them really, it makes no, I'm not surprised that they were at the top. I think Ty Davis-Price, Brian Robinson, a little bit of a surprise that they came off the board there towards the end of round number 3. These were guys, power backs, physical presences, guys that people, I don't think were really expecting them to come off the board as high because they weren't as big of a weapon there in the passing game as some of these other running backs. But at the end of the day, you look at, especially with Bijan Robinson, the performance that he's been able to put on there in Washington. Dameon Pierce, right at the top of the 4th round, 2nd pick there in round number 4, 107 overall to the Texans. We know what he's meant to the Texans thus far. Then after that, you've got Isaiah Spiller and Pierre Strong, who have been role players there. Hassan Haskins, the backup there to Derrick Henry in Tennessee. They came off the board in round 4. Tyler Algier has been a find for the Falcons. 5th round, 151 overall. A lot of people are talking about, hey, the Falcons need to get a running back. Should they go after Bijan Robinson, or should they go after possibly Jahmyr Gibbs? You've got a bona fide starter there in Tyler Algier. You also have Cordero Patterson carrying the rock in Atlanta. So I don't know that they necessarily need to use a high draft pick on any of these guys. They can wait until day number 3 if they want to get a role player there to fit in. Kevin Harris out of South Carolina, a role player for that group in the sixth round to the Pats. Keontae Ingram has gotten some playing time there with the Cardinals. And, also around 6, Connor Hayward to the Steelers. Really more of a fullback, H-back, tight end type, really that combination. We're going to see some of those guys in this year's draft class as well. He comes off the board towards the end of round number 6. And then in the 7th round, I mentioned that you're going to see some running backs come off the board late that are going to surprise you. Isaiah Pacheco was that guy, number 251 overall. And, we saw what Pacheco was able to do all season long for Kansas City. Performance in the Super Bowl as well. Who's going to be that guy? When you look at the past drafts, not only Isaiah Pacheco, but, we go back to those other drafts that we're talking about with round number 7. And, Myles Gaskin was the guy that was able to stick in with Miami. And then, obviously, there's Justin Jackson as well with the Chargers. None of those guys were able to make quite the impact that Isaiah Pacheco was able to make there with KC. Granted, it was probably also the right situation for him as well to be able to go in and get some playing time. But, I think the jury's still out for a lot of these running backs in terms of, how long they'll be able to stick in the league. And look, we know that the shelf life for a running back is relatively short. So as these running backs are coming in each and every year, just how many of them are going to be on a roster come year 3 or year 4 of their contract? A lot of times, we don't even get to that point with some of these guys because, look, you've got so many guys that can do a lot of different things, and you're trying to find the guys that are going to make that impact. Who's going to be more versatile? Who are guys that can be third down options? Who are guys that are great in pass protection? Those are things that are going to separate a lot of these running backs. So as we jump into this year's draft class, I just have 1 running back coming off the board in round 1, but I think we could have as many as 8 running backs coming off the board on the first 2 days of the draft. I've got 20 running backs that I feel confident that will get drafted, and there's a fullback that I throw in there as well. So if we want to include the fullback, we're talking 21. There's another fullback that I think we should mention, and potentially another running back that I can see coming off the board as well. But I think 20 to 21 is probably the right range for this year's draft class. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into kind of the order that I see for this running back class. And obviously, we got to start with Bijan Robinson out of Texas. 5'11", 215, runs a 4.46 40 at the combine, 37-inch vertical leap. But man, this is a guy that is able to do a little bit of everything there for Texas. 9th in the Heisman voting this past season. Over 1,500 yards, 1,580 to be exact, 6.1 yards per carry, 18 touchdowns. This guy had 60 receptions in his career as well. When you watch him run, this is a guy who can be physical between the tackles. You watch the vision, his ability, the patience to allow his blockers to set up, and then the acceleration through the hole, being able to pick his way through traffic, has the physicality to lower that pad level, run through guys. The contact balance is exceptional. Runs, but not only that, not only is he running through tackles, but he's also making guys miss. Being able to make guys miss in the hole, make guys miss out on the outside, and he has that speed to get to the edge, get to the corner, and run by you and take off and run, run at the distance. A guy, quick acceleration, a guy that's going to get to the second level, and what I like is he's so decisive. he sees that hole, and he's going to hit the hole in a hurry. He has such a great feel for the defense, and reading the flow of the defense, being able to cut off of that. Does a great job setting up his blocks. And as a pass catcher, look, I mentioned the receptions, the 60 receptions in his career. This is a guy who runs tremendous routes, the body control. This is a guy that can elevate and come down with some incredible catches. The ability to tightrope along the sideline if he needs to lay out and make it the acrobatic catch. He looks like a receiver when he's running some of these routes and going up and attacking the football in the air. You forget that he's a running back when he's out there. And he's also solid in pass protection as well. The most complete running back in this year's draft class. Where is he going to come off the board? I think he's a guy that he's a top 5, top 10 talent, but is there a team that's going to take him in the top 10 of the draft? I think it's highly unlikely. If the Eagles, because if you look at their roster, it's a pretty deep roster. I think they're going to look at, obviously, defensive end. Brandon Graham isn't getting any younger. Defensive tackle, Fletcher Cox, not getting any younger. Those are two areas that I can see them absolutely going after. They need to replace C.J. Gardner-Johnson there at safety. So, Brian Branch is also going to be in that mix. So you look at the Eagles, they have the 2 first-round picks, and Miles Sanders is gone. You've got Kenneth Gainwell. You brought in Rashad Penny and Boston Scott's there. So you have the running back by committee, but you're missing that home run threat. You put in Bijan Robinson. You have him pair up with Jalen Hurts. I mean, that's a pretty scary offense, because you also have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. It starts to get pretty scary when you start thinking about what the Eagles will be able to do with Bijan Robinson in that backfield. But would Howie Roseman take him in the top 10? That's not going to happen. I think if you do see Bijan go to Philly, it'll be if they trade down. And look, the Eagles haven't drafted a running back in the first round since Keith Byers in 1986, so I don't see it happening. But I think if it does, then that's really putting the league on notice. I mean, Philly's for real, and they're going to be sticking around for a long time. But after them, you start working things down, and I think there are a lot of teams that could use Bijan, but they're probably not going to go after him. You look at the Lions at 18. I don't see them going at 6 because they have to shore up that defense. 18, it would be intriguing, but they brought in David Montgomery. So I don't think the Lions are going there. But you look at Tampa sitting there at 19. Lenny is not there anymore, Leonard Fournette. So what Tampa needs to do is at least consider Bijan at 19. I know that they've got to shore up that defense a little bit, but frankly they need another tackle to pair up with Tristan Wirfs. So I think there are some other needs. So I don't see them going running back, but I don't think Bijan gets past the Chargers at 21. Austin Eckler's already asked for a trade. You need that number 1 running back, and this makes perfect sense to me. This is a guy that can really, I remember when LT was running for the San Diego Chargers, and the ability to really elevate that game, and that star power there. Imagine Bijan Robinson in LA. I like that fit. That's where I have him going. I can even see the Chargers trading up to get him potentially, depending on what ends up happening there with Austin Eckler. So that's my lone first-round pick is Bijan. I think it's Bijan and then everybody else. But Jahmyr Gibbs is a nice door prize, if you will. If you're sitting there, a team in round number 2 that you're looking for a running back, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a guy that you want to jump on relatively early. 5'9", 199 pounds, ran that 4.36 40 at the combine. That was very, very impressive. We knew that he was fast. Did we know that he was quite that fast? I don't know that we did. But definitely impressive. I have him actually going to the Arizona Cardinals there at number 34 overall. When you look at it, Gibbs is a slasher. He has the ability to put stress on defenses horizontally, finds that seam, gets downhill in a hurry. Then he has that quick acceleration, stop-start ability, makes you miss in the open field. Threat as a receiver, runs crisp routes, excellent body control as well. Reliable target with 103 receptions in his 3-year career at both Georgia Tech and then finishing it off there in Alabama with his junior season. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, it's a no-brainer there in round number 2. I think he's going to come off the board early in round 2. Could he sneak in at the end of round number 1? Potentially Philly sitting there at number 30. It's possible, but I think Arizona would love to pick him up there at the beginning of round number 2. My third running back is Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA. I think a lot of people have looked at Devon Achane or Zach Evans. I've seen some of those names popping up there in as that number 3 running back. I actually look at Zach Charbonnet, 6 foot 214, ran that 4.5 340 at the combine. But this guy, he's just a model of consistency, I think, there for the UCLA Bruins. He transferred to the Bruins after a couple seasons there in Michigan with the Wolverines. And what does he do? Just under 2,500 yards, 6.3 yards per carry, 27 touchdowns, and 61 receptions in his 2 years there with the Bruins. And a guy that just continued to get better and better. Look, his senior year, he averaged 7 yards a pop on the ground, which, I mean, come on, that's impressive for any running back. But, Zach Charbonnet, a guy that people were saying, look, he doesn't have that second year. He's not a guy that's going to run away from you. But look, he's a guy that just gets yards in bunches. He's one of those guys. He's kind of an upright runner. He's not overly shifty. You want to keep him really horizontal, because if you allow him to square his shoulders and build up momentum downhill, allow him to gather that speed, then, man, he's really tough to bring down. And look, he ran that 4.5 340, but then he ran an average 1.54 10-yard split. And that's really means, he has to gather himself to really get up to full speed, but he can still put in a very respectable 4.53. Thick lower half allows him to keep his footing after bouncing off tacklers. Going to run through plenty of tackles, drive the pile to finish runs, but he's also a weapon out of the backfield. Such soft hands. Excellent pass protector as well. I think Charbonnet, I look at the Bills. The Bills, at 59, look, I know that they've taken James Cook in last year's draft in the second round, but with Devin Singletary gone, I think they need another running back. Could they go with another smaller running back? They could, but I think really, if you want to bring in Zach Charbonnet, that's kind of a change of pace to what you already have there with James Cook. I think the two of them, that'd be a dynamic 1-2 punch there in the backfield in Buffalo. One other running back that I think could end up coming off the board in round number 2, I don't have it in my current mock that's on the website. I actually think he's going to fall to round number 3, and that's Devon Achane. They're out of Texas A&M. 5'8", 188, ran that 4.3 240. I mean, just absolute blazing speed, right? The thing that is, just a little concerning about Devon Achane is that lack of size. That's where I think the teams may look at him and say, I may not want to take him in round number 2, but I think round number 3 absolutely makes sense. And this is a guy that's just continues to get better and better for the Aggies over the 3 years there in College Station. Finished just 90 yards short of a 1,000-yard season in 2021. Follows that up with 1,102, 21 touchdowns in his career, 65 receptions as well, including 36 as a junior. But look, prior to that, this was a guy that had double-digit yards per reception, as a freshman and sophomore. Finishes his career 8.5 yards per reception. But look, there's no mistaking the fact that Devon Achane is, he's a track guy, has that speed, the home run hitting ability, but a guy who's also a tremendous receiver, and a guy that I think you can use in a number of different ways. You can put him in the slot, put him on the outside, allow him to run a wheel route out of the backfield, create some of those mismatches. And so maybe a team like the 49ers, I think the 49ers are looking for another guy that can come in and really help out Christian McCaffrey. I think Elijah Mitchell has a different type of running style. I think if you get a guy like Devon Achane in there, that speed demon, that speed merchant there on the outside, I think that would be really interesting in San Fran. Possible, like I said, possible second round, but I think I really would expect him to come off the board in round number 3. My second guy in round number 3, I'm a huge fan. It's Tyjae Spears out of Tulane. Come on, 5'10", 201. He was actually a lot bigger than I was expecting when I was looking at the stats. And 39-inch vertical leap there at the combine. And actually, running back, one of the 2 running backs with 10-inch hands. When you talk about guys and ball security, this is a guy that's got some bigger hands as well, bigger mitts to fit around the football. But just put on the tape of what he did against USC, just carving them up, and you'll understand why I'm so high on Tyjae Spears. Look, 1,581 yards on the ground for the Green Wave in 2022. That's 6.9 yards per carry, 19 touchdowns, 22 receptions coming out of the backfield as well. And Look, this is a guy that can beat you on the outside. He's so slippery. His elusiveness is something that I think absolutely jumps off the charts when you watch him play. When you watch him against the Trojans, it wasn't just the home runs that he put on display, but he was making things look so effortless out there. There's a 14-yard pickup on a third down play. It was a zone read, throw out into the flat. He was able to duck under the defensive end, Nick Figueroa, then danced down the sideline and was able to step out at the 3-yard line. The next play in Wildcat formation, speed to get to the outside. What you love is just the ability to duck right under the defensive end, so elusive in the open field. The speed to the outside, running through the tackles. He ran through 3 guys. Solomon Tuliaupupu, Eric Gentry, Jacoby Covington. That's a defensive lineman, a linebacker, and a corner en route to the end zone. Showing that speed, showing the contact balance. He started up the middle on a 63-yard run that ultimately set up 1st and goal. But what he ended up doing, he made 2 defenders miss, bounced it to the outside, split 4 SC defenders with speed down the sideline, took off. 2 plays later, bounces it to the outside for an easy 2-yard run. It's one of those things to where he did fumble in that game, so you have to worry about some of the cutback ability, trying to do a little bit too much. Mekhi Blackman was able to get his hand in and strip the ball. SC wasn't able to slow him down. That was really the only way that they were able to get him off the field, really. But you saw the low center of gravity. You saw the shiftiness, his ability to make plays between the tackles on the outside as a receiver. And then you saw him in pass protection. He was so good at pass protection against USC. Then you see him at the Senior Bowl doing the exact same thing. You saw the explosiveness, the quick acceleration, the decision-making, the elusiveness. He's got a little bit of everything. And when I look at Tyjae Spears, I think people are really sleeping on this guy. I think he's a guy that is going to come off the board earlier than people think. I look at a team like Denver. You've got Javonte Williams there. I know that he's battling back from an injury. You want to get another running back there in place. And I look at Tyjae Spears, especially with what he's been able to do. I think he'd be a great fit there for the Broncos. And look, he'd be also another weapon for Russell Wilson coming out of the backfield. I think that's one of the things that Russell will always be looking for, is some additional help there with not only his ability to run the football in the passing game, but also as that pass protector. They brought in Samaje Perine. You've got Javonte Williams, but you need that dynamic change of pace back, and I absolutely believe that Tyjae Spears can be that guy. So who's going to be next after him coming off the board in round number 3? I actually think it's going to be Kenny McIntosh. They're out of Georgia, 6 foot, 204. Ran that disappointing 4.62 40 there at the combine. This was a guy that I thought could potentially come off the board in round 2 because you love the versatility that you see out of him. He ran much faster at Georgia's Pro Day. Apparently the 40 time, they weren't releasing the times for some reason, but he felt that he ran much faster. So I would assume that that's the time that's got to be in the low to mid 4.5s. But this is a guy. Look, he's a bigger running back, a higher cut guy. So 6 foot, 204, but really was able to step up his competition and his level of play there in 2022. 149 carries. To that point, he had 130 carries in 3 seasons with the Bulldogs. But a senior year, 829 yards on the ground, 10 touchdowns, also 43 receptions. This is another guy I said all season long in my podcast that I thought that Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Kenny McIntosh were the top 3 in terms of receiving running backs with the smoothest hands and most exceptional route running. I think Tyjae Spears is probably kind of starting to creep in there a little bit. Devon Achane has the speed, but this is a guy I thought was really smooth there on the outside. This is a guy, look, wants to get the foot in the ground and get north and south. You see his ability to get to the corner, some of that speed. He has that acceleration that takes a little bit, but a guy that, again, the vision, the cutback ability, and then that smooth ability to make plays out of the backfield. Look, average 11.3 yards per reception. So a guy that definitely knows what to do with it when he gets the ball in his hands after making that reception down the field. Next on my list, I got to go with Tank Bigsby out of Auburn. I was debating whether or not Tank Bigsby or Zach Evans there in round number 3. I'm going Tank Bigsby because I think he's a little bit more versatile. Again, when we talked about the last 5 drafts, we look at a lot of the guys that were coming off the board in the first 3 rounds. You're talking about guys that were a lot more versatile, right? Guys that were able to run the ball between the tackles, bounce it to the outside, have the speed to be able to play wide when you need to, and then also be able to catch the football out of the backfield and be a pass protector. And I think Tank Bigsby does that a little bit more than Zach Evans. Also, Zach Evans battling some injuries, and those injury concerns durability has to be an issue. Tank Bigsby runs a 4.5 640. It's respectable, not overly spectacular, but look, 6 foot, 210 pounds, and with Bigsby there at Auburn, he was the guy that really was, he shared some time there in the backfield, but missed out on his second straight 1,000-yard season by 30 yards there in 2022, but over 2,900 yards on the ground for the Tigers in his 3 seasons, 25 touchdowns, also 62 receptions. So a guy that knows how to catch the football out of the backfield. To me, the pass protection is there as well. So he's a guy that I see as a 3rd-round pick. Because of those areas. He's a guy that I think could actually end up being a better pro than he was there at Auburn. Struggled to get things going at times, but man, you see the potential. You see a lot of the flashes there for Tank Bigsby for sure. On day 3 of the draft, look, you have a chance to get Zach Evans in round number 4. I think you're going to be very excited and jump at the chance to be able to do that. Zach Evans, I think, ran in the I think 4.46. To 4.5 range, I believe, at Mississippi's Pro Day. 5'11", 202, a bigger running back, 10 1/4 inch hands as well. Make sure to take care of that football. But when Zach Evans is healthy, he's so super explosive, right? 6.9 yards per carry in his career there at TCU, where he really got, 146 carries on the ground there, but then he shows up at Ole Miss, 144 carries, 936 yards on the ground, 9 touchdowns, and 12 receptions, and he's doing that in 12 games where he was slowed by some injuries and had to also share the backfield with Quinshon Judkins, a guy that we're going to be talking about there for a while in SEC play, a guy that really has a chance to be special there for Lane Kiffin and company. But you saw the presence there with Zach Evans, a powerful guy. I think he's exceptional, especially with the inside zone, being able to read his blocks and get downhill in a hurry. Decisive. A lot of times when those guards are pulling, he makes sure to run right off of the hip and hits those holes in a hurry. Does struggle at times catching the football out of the backfield. We saw that, Georgia Tech, there was a drop screen pass, really easy, and struggled there. But in that game, he actually showed off his ability to step up, pick up the blitzing linebacker, allows Jackson Dart to cut off the block and make a 13-yard run. So you definitely saw that on display. But then, against Alabama, going up against the likes of Will Anderson on a stunt, looping around through the A-gap, runs by the center, completely whiffs on the block. Definitely not good news for whoever's under center. So those are other things that you have to kind of keep in mind when you're looking at Zach Evans, the whole body of work, not just his ability to be a power runner and a guy that shows off quite a bit of speed, but ball security, hands, pass protection. I think he falls to day number 3. Eric Gray out of Oklahoma, I think he and Roschon Johnson are going to battle for the next spot. And I think, really Roschon can end up being the first guy coming off the board in round 4. What I like about Roschon, 6 foot, 219, he ran a 4.58 40 at the combine, not overly explosive, but that's not really going to be his game. This is a guy that's a power runner. He's a bigger physical guy. Texas had him at 6'2", 223, physical presence. And look, he was the guy that split time there with Bijan. And yet he was still able to put on a show there in his 4 seasons with the Longhorns, just under 2,200 yards on the ground, 23 touchdowns, 56 receptions as well. There's not a whole lot of wear on the tires, just 392 carries in 4 seasons, along with the 56 receptions. So with Roschon, though, you love the physicality, you love his ability to get downhill. I think he's a decent pass protector as well. So he's a guy to me that I think would be good value there on day number 3. You look at Eric Gray out of Oklahoma, as I mentioned previously, and this is a guy I think he has tremendous footwork. He's 5'9", 207. That's really the big thing that stood out to me. He started his career there at Tennessee, and ends up transferring over there to OU. And what he's been able to do there with the Sooners, really show off, his ability, the patience, his ability to allow those guards and tackles to pull around, follows them through the hole. You see really good wiggle, to cut off the block, then the explosion downhill. You love the wiggle, not only there bouncing it, but the wiggle in the hole, making guys miss in the hole, vision to see it, being able to set the guy up, then cut off of that in the burst to get downhill in a hurry. You love that. You love his ability to see the backside, the cutback lanes, the vision to not only see it, but then put his foot in the ground and get there. And then, shoot, he's got a really dangerous dead leg that he'll show off on safeties that are coming up to pick him up. The quick feet between the tackles, spin moves to avoid contact. A guy that just continued to rack up 100-yard performances there for the Sooners, and also had 33 receptions. When you look at this guy, in his 4 seasons there with the Vols and the Sooners, over 3,000 yards on the ground, including 1,366 in 2022, 6.4 yards per carry, might I add, and had 11 touchdowns for OU, 21 overall in his career, 99 receptions, including 33 this past season. A guy that's that's pretty versatile. He's not going to be a game breaker with the speed, but he's got pretty darn good athleticism, and a guy that's not only going to make you miss. I think he's quicker than he is fast, but a guy that's going to eat up a lot of yards down the field. I think someone's going to get a good football player in Eric Gray there on day 3 of the draft. And look, Sooner running backs, I don't care who the head coach is, whether it's Bob Stoops, Lincoln Riley, or Brent Venables, you're going to get productive running backs, guys that can be able to beat you between the tackles, on the perimeter, as receivers, and then in pass protection. So you're going to see some pretty complete running backs, and I think Eric Gray is going to be the next guy in line there. After that, you're going to get Chase Brown and Dwayne McBride. Chase Brown, look, 5'9", 209, runs that 4.43 40, 40-inch vertical leap, and 25 reps at 225 in the bench press. So athleticism for days with Chase Brown. I think there's no question about that. And there's really no surprise when you look at Chase Brown and say, all right, who was the guy this last season running the football? I mean, he's in Brett Bielema's offense. You needed a guy that was able to get downhill in a hurry, and Chase Brown was able to absolutely do that. 1,643 yards on the ground, 10 touchdowns to go along with 27 receptions. And what you get with Chase Brown is a guy that is a grinder. He's going to grind it out, Brett Bielema style. His ability to just continue to work for yards between the tackles, a physical presence, but a guy that also, when you get him loose on the outside, has the speed to go the distance. We saw that with that 4.43 40. A guy, look, 27 carries a game in 2022, so he was an absolute workhorse for the Illini. So when you look at that 1,643 yards, it makes perfect sense. A guy that is a very, he's a one-cut runner. Allow him to put his foot in the ground and get north and south, and then utilize that speed to his advantage. You love that, the ability to catch the football out of the backfield as well. I've got him slated just a little bit higher than Dwayne McBride, only because we really don't know what to expect out of McBride as a pass catcher. There's really not a whole lot that he's been able to been asked to do on third down in the passing game, and that's really why I've got Dwayne McBride kind of coming off the board after Chase Brown. But these guys are both a couple of workhorses. I think they could potentially come off the board on day 2, but I'm looking at day 3 just because, look, there were a lot of carries between these two guys, and I think 4th, possibly even 5th for these two, but I've got them right now coming off the board in round number 4. I look at Dwayne McBride, and look, over 1,300 yards on the ground as a sophomore, shows up as a junior, 1,713 yards, 7.4 yards per carry, 19 touchdowns, 36 overall in his career. A guy, look, over 3,500 yards for the Blazers, 7.3 yards per carry in his career, but just 5 receptions. A guy that really wasn't asked to catch the football out of the backfield by UAB. So it's one of those things to where you wonder, really, what are you getting in Dwayne McBride? Is he really just going to be an option on 1st and 2nd down, or is he a guy that can ultimately catch the football out of the backfield? I think that's on a consistent basis. Can he be reliable in that area? That's why I think that 4th to 5th round range feels like what makes the most sense there for McBride, just because of that lack of overall versatility, the question marks that are there. But when we talk about the wear on the tires, right, and we talk about the amount of, hey, they were workhorses for their collegiate programs, but Chase Brown, 676 carries. Ultimately, if you throw in the reception, 734 plays from scrimmage. And that's not just with the Illini. He started his career actually as a freshman at Western Michigan before transferring to Champaign there with the Illinois Fighting Illini. But not to be outdone, Dwayne McBride there for UAB, 437 carries in the last 2 seasons. That's a lot of wear that you're looking at with your running back. The good news is he didn't stick around for a 4th year, I guess, with the Blazers. But again, that's a lot of runs that you're going to be getting out of your running back. So you want to make sure that these are 2 guys that aren't already worn down. Because look, we already talked about the shelf life being very small for these guys. That shelf life, it's not going to last for very long. So you want to make sure that you're getting as much out of your running backs as possible. If they've already spent a lot of time carrying the rock for their teams there in college, you just worry about their ability to maintain for a number of years. Can they even get to a second contract? That's going to be a main question there, right? So after that, we get into round number 5, and I really bounced around between Sean Tucker and Israel Abanikanda. And these are guys, look, I have them coming off the board in round 5. I think 4th, 5th round range really feels right for these 2 guys. At one point, I had Izzy in the 3rd round. At one point, I even had Sean Tucker in the 3rd round as well. When you look at Sean Tucker, 5'9", 207, another track guy. You see a lot of speed out of Sean Tucker. He's got that narrow frame, despite being over 200 pounds. So you worry about that at times. But look, over 1,000 yards in each of the last 2 seasons for the Orange. 23 touchdowns during that time frame as well, to go along with 56 receptions. I love his versatility, though. A guy that's able to catch the football out of the backfield. Not a guy who's going to break a ton of tackles, but definitely that speed, the vision, allow him to get in space and do his thing. And then with Izzy, he's a more physical back, I think, between the 2 of them. Not as versatile, in terms of being able to catch the football out of the backfield. I think Sean's a little bit better than he is. But you look at Izzy, 5'10", 216 pounds, didn't run the 40 at the combine, but at Pitt's Pro Day runs a 4.41. So, when you look at a guy as thick as he is running that 4.41, when he was finally able to showcase what he could do there in 2022, over 1,400 yards on the ground, 20 touchdowns. So the dude has a nose for the end zone, and had 12 receptions, 38 total in his career. Really, most of those just coming on the last 2 seasons. Just had 2 receptions as a freshman. But with Izzy, I love the physicality. I love his ability to run between the tackles and bounce it and show the speed on the outside. That 4.41 shows you that he's a guy that can take it the distance at any point. He's a guy that I want to put in round number 3, especially because of that speed that he was able to showcase there at the Pro Day. I don't think anybody was expecting him to run quite that fast, so I think that's something, you look at Ade Adebare. We were talking about him being a potential day 2 pick, but now we've seen mock drafts putting him into the top 10 after what he was able to do at the combine. So I think there's a chance that Izzy, because of that Pro Day performance, could he sneak into round 3? It's possible. I think, when you're looking at where he was at round 5, I think ultimately he may sneak into round number 4. To me, Sean Tucker really feels like a 5th round pick at this point, but a guy that is going to be a nice change of pace option for whoever ends up drafting him. Kendre Miller, TCU, 5'11", 215. This is a guy who doesn't have that second year that some of these other guys that we're talking about have. But what you love about him is his vision, his cuts to be able to hit the hole in a hurry. Unfortunately, he doesn't have that second gear trying to run past the linebackers, but a guy that you love the contact balance, that low center of gravity that he's able to just drop the pad level and run guys over. Can be physically dominating at times. Not a huge weapon in the passing game there at TCU. So that's obviously a concern for any running back going into into the NFL. But look, still that said, 1,400 yards on the ground, 17 touchdowns, did have 16 receptions. I think ultimately what's impressive about Kendre Miller and why we may see him come off the board earlier was you saw what he meant to that Horned Frogs offense. And when he was down, and with that injury, they really struggled in the playoffs. To really figure out anything on the ground. I know Amari DeMercado was able to really get things going, but it would have been a completely different offense if you had Kendre Miller in the backfield. He was really the guy that was the tone setter for that offense, even though you had Max Duggan and you had Quentin Johnson and all that speed at receiver with Darius Davis and Savion Williams, and you could just keep naming off all the different receivers there. It was really Kendre Miller that's kind of set the tone for that offense. So he's a guy that I think, could he be a third-round pick? I think it's possible. I think 4th to 5th really feels like that's probably his comfort zone. And really, when I think about it now, I think Izzy and Kendre will probably come off the board before Sean Tucker. But I think all three of them probably in that 5th round range feels about right. Round number 6. We're going to see, I think this is where Deuce Vaughn is coming off the board. Look, he measured in at 5'5", 179. He still ran, I think he ran a 4.4 640 at K-State's Pro Day. I saw that there was a Twitter debate as to whether or not that's fast. For him and his size, look, he's shifty. Is he going to, you're talking about a guy, how often is he going to be sitting there running those 40-yard dashes and everything like that? The shiftiness is absolutely there. He is quicker than he is fast. I think he has that home run speed. He gets to, gets the top end speed pretty quickly, but you love that elusiveness. You love his ability to make you miss in the open field. And he's such a dynamic weapon. I think that's one of the things that was so much fun watching him there with the Wildcats. The lack of size, obviously, that's going to be a concern, and that's why he falls as far as he does. But what I'm expecting to see. But look, over 1,400 yards on the ground as a sophomore, follows it up with over 1,500 yards as a senior. And then at the receiving value as well, 116 receptions in his 3 seasons in Manhattan, Kansas. Look, that small stature, that small size, he was still able to get it done at a high level playing in the Big 12. So it's kind of like you talk about Bryce Young and just his lack of size, and can he see the entire field? He's been small his entire life, and yet you still see what he's been able to do there out on the football field. When you look at Boston Scott, here's kind of the comparison. Boston Scott at Louisiana Tech, 1,800 yards on the ground in his career with the Bulldogs, and went over 1,000 yards, 1,047 as a senior, 32 receptions in his career, including 20 in his final season there in 2017. And you see the impact, the niche that he's been able to carve out there with the Eagles. I don't care what you say about Deuce Vaughn, the size, he should have run a faster 40 time. He's the guy that's going to get drafted. I think it's going to be in the 6th round. And he's the guy that's not only going to make a team, but I think he's going to end up making an impact. Another guy that was diminutive, I mentioned him earlier, and that's Tariq Cohen. 5'6" and 191 pounds, coming out of North Carolina A&T. Was actually a 4th round pick of the Chicago Bears back in 2017. And this was the guy that was able to do a little bit of everything for them coming out of the backfield, right? 5,600 yards on the ground, 56 touchdowns, and then 98 receptions. So, I mean, if you look at just the college statistics, absolutely blew everyone away with what he was able to do there. And then he did show up at the Combine, did measure in at 5'6", runs a 4.4 240, weighed in at 179 pounds. So when you talk about him and you look at, he weighed in at 179, ended up playing at 191. So he ended up adding on some of that size. And so I think when you look at these two guys, Boston Scott, Tariq Cohen, 4th round, I think, when you look at Tariq Cohen and the production gets into that low 4.4s, that really got everyone excited. Could we see Deuce Vaughn come off the board in round 5? I think to the right situation, he could end up doing well there. Ultimately, I think Deuce Vaughn feels right at about round 6, although the production was much better than what you saw out of Boston Scott, which was why Scott was in round 6. You see Cohen there in round 4. Don't be surprised if Deuce Vaughn is a 4th or 5th round pick when it's all said and done, because of his versatility to be able to do a lot of different things. It reminds you a lot of Darren Sproles as well. I honestly think that people are sleeping on Deuce Vaughn. I think he's going to be a guy that can carve out a nice little niche for himself there at the next level. Round number 7, is there going to be a guy in this year's draft that we're going to see have a breakout? Isaiah Pacheco did it. Is it going to be Mohamed Ibrahim there out of Minnesota? 5'8", 203. This is a dude who is a freaking bowling ball. So tough to bring down. Hits the hole hard, gets downhill in a hurry. A guy that seems to rack up yards for days. He lacks the burst. I think that's really the biggest thing that you see. But you love his ability to run inside and outside. You see the vision, his ability to be patient, set up his blocks, and then be able to explode to daylight. Drops that pad level, squares you up, and will run you over. Look, he's going to drive you down the field 4 extra yards after contact. He's really a lot of fun to watch. Wasn't a huge receiving option there for the Gophers, but look, they were a run-oriented offense anyway, so that's really what you saw out of him. What you love about Mohamed Ibrahim, though, is that nose for the end zone. In 12 games in 2022, 20 touchdowns. Look, in 2020, through 7 games, the COVID-shortened season, 15 touchdowns on the ground. When he was healthy, this guy had 1,000-yard seasons in 2018 as a true freshman, in 2020, and in 2022 had 1,665 yards. We know that he tore his Achilles there in 2021 after just 1 game, but that was a huge game. Had 30 carries for 163 yards and 2 touchdowns. This dude can be a beast. Can be an absolute beast. Has that nose for the end zone, something that teams should be excited about. The problem is you worry about the durability, you worry about some of the that lack of burst, and you worry about whether or not he can get that burst back to where it was after that Achilles tear. That's going to be a huge concern. I think ultimately he has the ability to, look, if he's healthy, I think he's a guy that teams could fall in love with. And again, it has to be the right situation. I would love to see Mohamed Ibrahim come off the board early. I'm a huge fan of his. I'd love to see him come off the board in round 4. I just think realistically, because of that lack of burst, plus the Achilles tear, plus the fact that he only has 22 receptions in 5 seasons in a Golden Gopher uniform, I think ultimately that's why he comes off the board in round number 7. But he's a guy, he could very well be that guy that ends up having a huge presence at the next level. If it's not him, it could be Keaton Mitchell out of East Carolina. Look, 5'8", 179 pounds, ran a 4.37 40, but that 1.48 split. You want to talk about a guy that can get to full speed in a hurry. This is the dude. 38-inch vertical leap as well. When I put on the film and I watched the Pirates play, I wanted to tune in and watch this guy because he really is must-see TV. So I watched a lot of their games live. And you just watch the speed, the burst, the ability to get to the outside. Obviously, he's not the biggest guy. He's going to be your change of pace back, but that's okay. When you talk about what he did there at ECU, though, he showed his ability to be a guy that could weather the storm for a while for you. Over 200 carries, 1,452 yards, 7.2 yards per carry, and 14 touchdowns to go along with 27 receptions. That's 60 in his career, over 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns on the ground. This is a guy, look, the explosiveness, speed talks, and so I think at the end of the day, that's ultimately what's going to end up seeing him get drafted. I would have loved to see him come back for one more season and really improve that draft stock. Could that speed get him drafted earlier on day 3? I think it's possible, but I think ultimately 7th round feels about right. And he'll be a guy that I think could still end up making a roster because, look, he is so damn explosive. Chris Rodriguez out of Kentucky, 6 foot, 217 pounds. He's big, he's physical, he's mean. You saw the difference that he made, when he came back to that Wildcat offense. Just the presence there really took kind of a load off of Will Levis. And look, 2021 was his banner year. 1,378 yards on the ground and 10 touchdowns. Look, in just 8 games with the Wildcats in 2022 after coming back, after being suspended, 904 yards on the ground and 6 touchdowns. This is a dude, look, 592 carries. So a guy that can be a workhorse for you if needed. Again, you worry about some of the wear there on those legs. He's also going to have to answer to that suspension. and those games that he missed. Going to have to answer to all that off-field issues. Character is going to be a huge concern there as well. Not much of a factor, in third down, really as a receiver. But really, what you see is what you get. This is the big kid, big physical presence, the guy that's going to be able to run the ball between the tackles, get those tough yards when you need to. If everything checks out in terms of the interviews with Chris Rodriguez, I think he could end up being a steal there in round number 7, be a guy that could really be that hammer that you need on those short yardage situations, and a guy that really needs to grind some of those yards out for you. And then finally, you got to go with Evan Hull out of Northwestern. 5'10", 209, ran a 4.47 40, 21 reps, 225 in the bench press as well, 37-inch vertical leap. I think a much better athlete than people were really expecting to see coming out of Northwestern. A guy, look, the speed was absolutely there. Just missed out on back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Was just 87 yards shy there with the Wildcats. A guy that, look, receiving. This dude was able to do that for Northwestern. Had 55 receptions this past season. So when you talk about Northwestern football in 2022, Evan Hull meant everything to that program, because not only was he the leading ground gainer, he was also the second leading receiver. Malik Washington, the number 1 wideout, 65 receptions. Evan Hull following second behind him with those 55. He was also second in yardage as well. So really a guy that was able to make a lot of plays there for the Wildcats. He's just a guy that's going to be a gamer. He's going to hustle his butt off. He's a guy that's going to block for you there in pass protection. He's a guy, to me, that I think teams want to have on their roster. So he may not have a lot of the credentials that some of these other guys have playing there at Northwestern, but he's a guy that I think absolutely is going to stick things out. And if you watched the Combine, I know that the broadcast, that Rich Eisen and Daniel Jeremiah were talking about it, but you watched him on every single run play, every reception as well. He took it all the way to the house. He had been doing that for quite a while. But took everything to the house. So you see the effort. Effort's always there. That's what sets him apart. I think that's ultimately going to register with a team, and that could end up getting him drafted higher than some of these higher profile running backs, is that effort, that hustle. So don't sleep on Evan Hull. And I mentioned the fullback position. I know there's going to be at least one that's going to get drafted, and I think he may come off the board in round number 6 because he does a little bit of everything. He's not just a fullback. That's Hunter Lepke out of North Dakota State, 6'1", 230 pounds. We didn't get him to really see him showcase everything that he could do at the Combine. But this is a dude that not only was a fullback, but he also lined up at tailback, at tight end, at Wildcat. So the guy did a little bit of everything. He's physical between the tackles, showcases a little bit of a burst as well. He's very athletic, so that's why I think you can use him there at the H-back spot. He could be a lead blocker for you. You can move him around, let him play a lot of different positions. So I think that means that that role of his, he even plays special teams. He can do a lot of different things for you. Ultimately, he's going to have to end up spending some time in a lot of different rooms, running back room, tight end room, special teams. But when you're wearing a number of hats like that, that's going to get you to stick there at the next level. Very soft hands as a pass catcher as well. This is a dude that I wouldn't count out. I think 6th round makes a lot of sense. Teams that are looking for a fullback, this is a guy that I think is going to excel there. But look, he can fill into a lot of other roles for you as well. He can be that third tight end for you. He can be an H-back. He's going to be a guy that can be a goal line option for you, carrying the football. So he just brings a lot of different options to your offense, which I think is really going to be a lot of fun. And speaking of a guy that can bring a lot of different options, a guy who's another jack of all trades, if you will, at the fullback position, is none other than Jack Coletto out of Oregon State. 6'3", 239. If you don't know the guy's story, this dude he loves to play football. Showed up there playing quarterback his first 2 seasons there for the Beavers. Ultimately moved to linebacker, a reserve linebacker, to start out the season, but then they also brought him in as kind of an option. You remember Blake Bell, the belldozer there at OU? Well, Jack Coletto was the guy. He was really the hammer for them. A guy who just had a nose for the end zone. 22 touchdowns in his career. Not much of a pass threat, just 4 receptions, but that's really because he wasn't asked to do that. This is a guy you just knew goal line situations. If it was going to be a 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, and you saw Jack Coletto run out onto the field, if 12 was in the lineup, you knew he was probably going to get the football, or he was going to be the lead blocker. In some way, he was going to make an impact. This guy also played special teams, and then he was a reserve linebacker, nose for the football, super intense guy, a guy that, look, the multiple positions that he played, I think that's what's going to get him onto a roster. I think he can end up sticking it out too. You've got, he's going to play fullback for you. He's going to get that physicality. He's been able to learn the position and be able to be a lead blocker. The nose for the end zone, that's something. Not everybody's able to do that. This is a guy that just continued to fall forward, always moving forward, moving the pile. He was so difficult to bring down for a lot of Pac-12 schools. Just always continuing to move that pile. He can play linebacker. He can be a special teams guy for you. Keep an eye out for Jack Coletto. I am pulling for him. I hope he gets drafted there in round number 7. So if he does get drafted, then the guys that I've been talking about, that would bring our total to 22. And I think 22 is probably on the high end. So a couple of the fullbacks, I think you're going to see one, like I said, with Hunter Lepke. I think if you bring in Jack Coletto, 22, that's a little on the higher end. We haven't seen 22 running backs come off the board very often in this draft. Although, good news, 2022 was actually the highest that we've seen in quite some time with 24. And who was taken in round number 7, number 260 overall? None other than Xander Horvath out of Purdue, a fullback going to the Chargers. A guy that, look, he played some tailback there for the Boilermakers, also at fullback, and ended up getting drafted at the end of round number 7 there by the Chargers. Don't be surprised if Jack Coletto can slide his way in. That puts you at 22. I mentioned that there may be 1 or 2 other running backs that can end up hearing their name called. I think Deneric Prince is going to be a guy that's going to be watched closely. 6 foot, 216 pounds, ran a 4.41 40. They're coming out of Tulsa. And, I love his physicality. I think this is a guy that can play between the tackles. He showed off, obviously, the speed that I don't think people were expecting to see out of him. I think it sent people to watch more film of him there with the Golden Hurricanes. You didn't see the burst that 4.41 really showcases. You didn't always see the power either, despite being a bigger running back. So I think this is a guy that you want to see more of, and he may be a priority free agent, but a guy that I think could stick with the program because he has some of that he can be physical. I've seen it. I know that he can make catches out of the backfield. He can break some tackles as well in the passing game. But I think he may need a couple of years on the practice squad before he ultimately ends up making an impact, which is why I think he may not get drafted. The other guy to keep an eye on is Travis Dye out of USC. 5'10", 201. I know that he had 9 fumbles there at Oregon, but this is a guy, you watch what he did and what he meant for USC this past season. They were a much different team once Travis Dye went down to the ACL injury. He was the leader of that team. I know you had Caleb Williams, and he was a tremendous leader as well, but Travis Dye was really the guy that kind of was that emotional leader. I think Caleb Williams was the guy that led the team and was really the face of the program, but Travis Dye was the emotional leader. 884 yards in those 10 games, 9 touchdowns at 30 in his career. In 2021, that was his banner year. Over 1,200 yards on the ground, 16 touchdowns, 46 receptions, has 104 in his career. Doesn't have a huge burst to his game. Not the biggest guy by any means. Not going to wow you with the athleticism, but the dude just gets it done. He runs with a low pad level. He bounces off of tackles. He's an intelligent player, excellent pass protector. So it's one of those things to where I don't want to rule out Travis Dye. This is a guy, look, he was battling back from the ACL. He almost was able to make it to the combine. That was really what his goal was after tearing up his knee. How he was able to nearly get back to that, that just shows that determination. He's a guy I think will probably end up being an undrafted free agent, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see him get drafted late because of what he means in the passing game as a pass protector. Leadership that you saw out of him as well. He was also, he was the guy that was down there on the field and was in everybody's ear, talking guys up. So I think teams see that. You got to have those guys in the locker room. He's a guy that you really want to pull for. You love to see that out of him, and you worry about some of that durability, especially now. But he had 770 plays from scrimmage, 666 on the ground, and then another 104 receptions. So there's a lot of wear on that body, and so that's the one thing that you do worry about. And yes, the ball security is a concern as well. But man, like I said, he's a guy that you want to give a chance to because he can really be a positive influence in any team's locker room. So with that, we'll go ahead and put an end to the running back class, and we'll go ahead and look forward to the receiver podcast. We're going to talk about who that number one receiver is going to be, where they're going to come off the board. Jackson Smith-Njigba, looks like it's probably going to be him. Quentin Johnston out of TCU, Jordan Addison of USC. Those are guys that are in that conversation. Then you have Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, smaller guys, but the route running is absolutely exceptional. I think you could see as many as 5 receivers come off the board in round number 1. It's actually kind of a down year at the receiver position at the top of the draft, and we still could potentially see 5 receivers come off the board in round number 1. Can't wait to bring it to you. We'll be talking about guys that we're going to see coming off the board all the way from round 1 to round 7, even some priority free agents to be on the lookout for as well. So until next time, everyone, for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Until next time, I